raise some
cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, we'll watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some cane.
Welcome to the Raising Cane Show, where we tackle the critical issues shaping our republic today. I'm your host, Nate Kane, and today we have a remarkable guest joining us, David Serpa. David is a United States Marine Corps combat veteran, business owner, author, and a candidate for Congress in California's 39th District. He's running on a platform of unity, energy independence, and meaningful reform, addressing the most pressing concerns for both California and the nation. From securing our water and energy resources to reshaping healthcare with his vision for the United States Medical Corps, David's focus is on bringing practical conservative solutions that put the American people first. We'll also dive into the stark contrast between David and his opponent, Mark Takano, who has come under fire for his controversial positions on gender identity, including biological males competing in women's sports. Viral moments like the "What's a Woman" clip have sparked debate, with even Mike Tyson weighing in on the issue. We'll break down the differences and get to the heart of what's at stake for California voters. David, welcome to the show.
It's good to see you, Nate. Appreciate you having me on.
So you've got quite a background, and I guess, I'd like to start with asking you, can you tell us a little bit about, your journey to deciding to run for office?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Northern California. I lived in California my whole life. And I was raised by my mom, who worked very hard growing up. And I had two younger sisters. And a lot of the things that I experienced growing up in the 90s are things that I don't want our children to experience today. And these are things that are getting worse. I went off to Los Angeles, and where I wrote and directed some stage plays, did some sketch comedy and some stand-up comedy, and was involved in the arts and entertainment. And my sister went and served in Iraq. She's a combat vet. She actually just moved to West Virginia. And then I was inspired by her to go and serve in the Marine Corps, and I ended up serving in Afghanistan. I got back, jumped into real estate, made a bunch of money in real estate, ultimately decided that was not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And, had a little bit of a mental and spiritual crisis, led to a mental and spiritual breakthrough, checked myself into the VA, and realized that this country really needs some help. And I think that's one of the reasons why veterans are struggling is, we wanted to serve this country. We believe in this country. And then we see what's happening to it when we come home. And so I believe that the demons that you don't fight, you pass along to your children. I don't want to send our children off to World War III. I don't want them to experience the next Great Depression. And I certainly don't want to continue to stoke the fires of the next Civil War, because that's just intellectually lazy to think that the fight is between us and our brothers and sisters on the left wing. It's not. This is us on the left and the right against these oligarchs who continue to control the system and always have controlled the system.
Without a doubt. On that note, I think one of the things that I've seen that has been consistent is, veterans, especially combat veterans, who have seen, what war is like. There's nothing glorious about it. And that is the one thing that, we all want to see, us avoid as much as possible. And certainly, another civil war. This country has had one in the past, and that would be devastating to happen again. I've always thought that if that happened, that would be the end for America, because without a doubt, our enemies would see that as a weakness, and they would invade. I've been concerned about the direction of the country as well, and it just seems like we're becoming more and more polarized. But you're right, a lot of that polarization is really driven by the media. It's driven by what a lot of people are talking about in the psychology profession of mass formation. There's a almost like a mind virus at work, across the country, and it's heavily, plaguing places like California and some of our more liberal states. But it's unfortunate that we're seeing this, because there is a lot that we actually can agree on.
That's correct,
right? I think everybody wants to see prosperity. Everybody would like to see safety, right? Everybody wants to see their children be able to get a good education.
That's right.
Those are all things that matter to everyone. We all see,
and it's by design. It's not something that is natural. I think it's very natural for us to love our neighbors, to love our community, to feel a sense of camaraderie between us and our fellow Americans. And what they don't want is they don't want us to get on the same playbook, because the playbook for them is divide, conquer, and colonize.
That's
and
right.
You and I both know that what they're trying to do is they're trying to create industries and industrial complexes around our food, our water, our energy, our housing, our healthcare, our education. And so the response to that is to unite and to define common sense so that we could find a little bit of common ground and ultimately take the fight to the system. Because if there is systemic injustice, which I believe that there is, then it requires a systemic response. And the same people that control their water and resources and oil and lithium and uranium throughout the world control it here at home.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned three things there in that your last statement, which really kind of, to me, hit me as three of the most important things to avoid, right? Another Great Depression, another World War, and Civil War. And we mentioned about the Civil War issue, but let's talk about the Great Depression. Can
I expand on the Civil War just really briefly?
And then
let's jump into because I think that that's what they want us to do. They want the left and the right to be fighting each other. But I do believe that what we need to realize, and I think that we've realized it on the right first, is that it's not left versus right. It's class warfare. It used to be the have-nots versus the haves. Now it's the have-nots versus the have-yachts. The wealth division has become so steep, and so there's such a contrast where the lower and middle class were bled of $1 billion of wealth per day, while a new billionaire was created every day. Our neighbors are not our enemies. Our enemies are the people who continue to bleed this country dry while making it appear as if the wealthiest country in the world is bankrupted by debt. I'm ready to jump into the Great Depression when you are.
Yeah. So I just had I had a guy on the other day who we talked about the death of the dollar and where things are going out of control, the out of control spending, but really the monetary policy we have in our country that has been going on really since the 70s when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And what has propped up, I guess, the dollar has been, the concept of the petrodollar and our ability to be able to kind of control or have Saudi Arabia control anybody that wanted to buy oil, being able to, they had to convert that into US dollars. And the fear, and I think it's a justified fear, is that now that Saudi Arabia has said, we're not going to abide by that agreement anymore, and they've now opened that agreement up to Russia and to China and other BRIC nations, and that was an inevitability anyways, because ever since we discovered how to frack and how to get oil out of shale, it's opened up other ways in other countries for being able to develop their oil assets and resources. But we're facing a situation now because we have all this US dollars. I think only 1/3 of all of the US dollars, only 1/3 of them are actually within our borders.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of those US dollars are out there in the world economy. And if all of those dollars come back to inside of our borders, we are looking at massive deflation of the dollar, which will cause hyperinflation.
Correct.
And the experts that are willing to talk about it, because a lot of them are not willing to talk about it, because they don't, number one, they don't want to cause panic. But the reality is we're looking at a terrible economic situation here.
That's correct.
What do you see as something that we can do to prevent that or stave that off? Or maybe we're going to have to transition, obviously, the dollar, from being a petrodollar to having some sort of backing and not just
left
currency.
The petrodollar a long time ago, as far as I'm concerned, basically as soon as we got on it, and we left it for the war dollar, where we fund 73% of the world's authoritarian dictatorships. The Department of Defense, we're veterans. You served in the Army, I served in the Marine Corps. This is not something that I love to say, but the Department of Defense felt that sixth consecutive audit, they're unable to account for 61% of $3.5 trillion in weapons and assets and liquid capital throughout the globe. We left $8 billion in weapons behind in Afghanistan. And in addition to that, like I said, we're continuing to send this money overseas, but we're not doing it intelligently. We have sanctions on an astronomical amount of countries. And what happens is when you sanction a country and you limit their ability to get their hands on the world reserve currency, they look for other currencies, and look no further than Russia. Russia, before the start of this war between them and Ukraine, 70% of their transactions were backed by the dollar. That's something that brings economic stability to America, and quite honestly, to the rest of the world. We should have more friends and allies that feel comfortable trading in the dollar. But instead, you continue to manipulate the currency. We print the currency. We determine who and who cannot trade in the currency. We freeze their assets when we go to war. We give their assets away to other countries that they're at war with. And so Russia went from having 70% of all their transactions backed by the dollar to just 3 years later having less than 20% of their transactions backed by the dollar. And what this does is it brings about massive economic instability, because you have NATO, because we continue to think that we're going to control the world through military alliances. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization accounts for about 850 million people throughout the globe, while as BRICS nations already account for 4.5 billion people throughout the globe, with another 58 countries applying for membership to join BRICS. And so people have had enough of America's imperialism, America continuing to be a bully throughout the world, because it's not even that we're the world police. We are corporate interest, the big muscle for corporate interest throughout the globe, which is what General Smedley Butler called out nearly 100 years ago after World War I, when he said that war is a racket. And then again, General Eisenhower brought it up in his farewell address when he called out the military-industrial complex. And these same powers are using the military today to gain control overseas and to gain control of our country. Because there's two ways to, rule over a country. And you and I both know this. This is Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which is a great book by John Perkins. But what you do is you can either control a country militarily, which means outright conventional warfare, or you can control them monetarily, which means you control their money, their assets, their resources, and you control them legally through contracts that are enforced at the point of a gun.
Yeah. And that's actually, that is happening now with China. They've learned from us. They're doing this around the world with their Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, I think several ports, in multiple countries are now owned essentially by the Chinese, because they've indebted those nations to build out those ports, and now they've taken them over. And in fact, they had contracts within the port of LA. During the Obama administration. And I think that was something that Trump, addressed and did away with. I don't know what the circumstances are now.
Correct. But I mean, you look at either our ports, which, are controlled. And, there's so much that we can talk about canals throughout the world. But the other thing that you look at is our food, who controls our farmland.
Yeah.
because
China's buying up our farmland. Yeah.
China is buying up our farmland. The multinational corporations are buying up our farmland. Big ag, big farming. Also Canada. And you and I both know how many companies will use Canada as a shell company to then go in and try to take over our resources, because we have some of the most arable land throughout the world, like our uranium. And
which has happened.
Correct. And so, to wrap up on farming, and then I'd love to talk about uranium and the way that our uranium is controlled by outside resources or outside sources. But California is the breadbasket of America. Yeah. We're where America gets its food. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. They feed a lot of Europe because of the soil in Ukraine is so good. And then Iran is the breadbasket of the Middle East. And so when you look at Iran, it's not just about the oil, it's about the amount of food that they're able to provide. Punjab in India was the first district in India to start suffering because of their farmland. And so the playbook that gets applied throughout the world gets applied right here in California, and they dry up our land by design so that they can purchase it for pennies on the dollar. And then they purchase our water infrastructure, which is developed on public funds, i.e. our dollars. We vote for water infrastructure here in California or in Flint, Michigan, which is then sold to private enterprise, which then controls it in backroom deals, like what happened in California with the Resnick family and the wonderful company purchasing $150 billion a year, 150 billion gallons a year in a closed door meeting in Monterey. And so 150 billion gallons of California water goes to the Resnick family for their wonderful company empire in Kern County, every year. And we're told to conserve water and to limit the amount of times that we're flushing our toilets. It's so asinine when you look at it.
It's no longer, and this is something else too I've heard talked about, and I agree that we're not living. Our economy is no longer a capitalist economy. It is a crony capitalism, where you've got basically special interests that are in bed with government interests, and they're working together. Another case in point of that is in the big tech industries. The intelligence community, which I've worked in and have served with for a very long time in my career. They don't even, this whole problem of like FISA and 702 abuse, which is a huge problem. Even if we resolve that, it doesn't matter, because they can go to Google and they can go to Twitter and they can go to Facebook and they can get them to spy on us for them. That's what they've been doing. And unfortunately, we've not seen, I don't think, enough action by the courts to stop that.
No, so absolutely.
So you've got a massive problem, I think, in this country of this. It's almost like a neo-fascism, is what I'm calling it, where it's the corporate interests basically that are in control of things. But it's not just that. There's more to it. It's more complex and nuanced. You've got the intelligence community that the deep state, if you will, the bureaucracy that wants to maintain power and control, and so they utilize these corporations as well for their benefit. The corporations use the government for their benefit, and the people at the end of the day who don't get anything for their benefit are us.
We're treated like product.
That's right.
We're treated like product. And so the thing is if it's free, you're the product. And that's the way that a lot of our tech is right now, is we are treated like a product. This
is why the Democrats are opening the border wide, because they do see us as a product. And so they want to increase the amount of people in the United States.
That's correct.
It drives down wages for everyone.
Which big tech and big business and big ag, they all benefit from this. I mean, you look at Tyson gets an $8,900 annual tax credit for every illegal immigrant that they hire into their factories. And anything big, you need to question, libertarians who don't want big government, but they don't care about big business, big church, big government, big tech, anything that gets really big, you have to start worrying about it and worrying about the bureaucracy that starts to take place within it. Because the thing is about big tech, they're not loyal to America.
No,
they
because
realize
they're
that this is
multinational corporations.
a global market. And so
they want to do
Silicon
business
Valley,
in China just as badly as they want.
that's
to do
exactly where I was
here.
getting ready to go. So Elon Musk is just as heavily invested in the Silicon Valley of China as he is in our own Silicon Valley, because, he understands the market that Shanghai would bring, which is why he built such a massive Tesla factory in Shanghai. And so what's going to happen is, if our tech industry leaves the Silicon Valley, it's not going to leave for New York. It's not going to leave for Texas or for Florida. It's going to leave for China, because they have access to lithium, and they actually, harvest the lithium there. They have access to cheap labor, or, some could call it slave labor. And then they also have access to an authoritarian government. And so the response needs to be an American response, where we control our lithium, our extraction, and uranium, and oil, and gasoline, and natural gas, and our water. Because what happens is all of our all of our lithium, like 34 million tons of lithium in the Salton Sea, who's going to be in charge of so much of that? Warren Buffett. What does he know about lithium extraction? Get real. And so we sell off all of our stuff to our elites when we say that America should be ran like a business.
Yeah.
Okay, well, every business that I've ever known has a product, and that product is sold to help them cut a deficit and get to a surplus so that they can issue a dividend to their shareholders. And so I believe that America should be ran like a business, and the American people should own that business, and that business should be involved in the products that we currently go to war over. Because, Vice President Harris said in the past, wars were fought over oil, but in the short future, they will be fought over water. Well, I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in a country that's pushing that sort of a narrative, where BlackRock is controlling and in charge of her foreign policy, and she's hiring advisors right out of BlackRock who benefit financially when we go to war. And in rebuilding the countries that we go to war with. So there's an incredible amount of crony capitalism, which has made this a very corrupt country to live in, which does not favor the people anymore, but it favors the oligarchs. And we have to check the system from the inside.
Without a doubt. And the other thing too, on that note, what you were talking about with China, one of the things that is, I find just very hypocritical, if you will, is that we put ourselves under all of these restraints when it comes to climate change and, carbon emissions and all of that. We don't expect any of that from China or India or any of these other, developing nations, as they call them. But the reality is, China is, they're producing more than twice the amount of carbon emissions that we do. So why are we restricting ourselves? Because at the end of the day, we're going to lose, this battle. It seems to me
we're losing it. We're losing it. We're 20 years behind right now. And the reason why we're 20 years behind is because in 1992, we privatized all of our uranium in this country. And so, of course, what happens when you privatize something and you prop it up with government subsidies is you create scarcity in a market artificially, and then you ration that product back to the people when the people should have owned it to begin with. And so what happened was, you saw in 1992, when we privatized the uranium, you saw them start shutting down nuclear facilities. And they started shutting down enrichment facilities. And then they got another $2.9 billion from President Biden just this year. But America doesn't even enrich uranium anymore. We have to send our uranium out for it to be enriched. America doesn't even have the equipment to extract lithium anymore. We don't even manufacture it. And guess what? China isn't selling it to us. And so China and Russia.
They're selling a lot of the precursor chemicals to fentanyl to the cartels in Mexico, who are then shipping that into our country to kill us.
Oh, sure. And, this is all connected. 90% of all of our pharmaceuticals are imported from China. So, Pfizer, you think that Pfizer as an American company has any loyalty to you, the American people? No, they do not. No. They would rather prop their company up with slave labor import their goods as cheaply as possible, which are not necessarily doing anything for you, and not all of them are helping you or making you better, but they own the patents for it. And so the pharmaceutical industry is extraordinarily corrupt. But you do know why all of these fentanyl deaths started taking off about 12 years ago? Well, that's when we started our drawdown in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, the Taliban have eliminated the opioid trade. And before that, who was propping up the opioid trade? It was America. It was the CIA. We absolutely flushed the market with cheap, high quality heroin, which people got addicted to.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan grew more opium than the 10 times over than the rest of the world combined. And so they were exporting poppy, which then which also funds their operations with the Taliban at the time, and makes it so that they can continue to fight their fight against, the Americans that are in their country. And then what happens? Well, Taliban takes over, they go in, they start shutting down the opium trade. And then next thing you know, it's all about fentanyl. It's about what can be created artificially. And this is not high quality. And it's not something that, people are struggling to overdose from. And in fact, it's become the number one killer of American men in my age group, 18 to 45.
Yep.
And so the sort of way that we have messed with the supply chain and the way that we have artificially propped up the drug trade has made it so that we have been complicit in crimes throughout the world. And we need to disentangle ourselves from the rest of the world and focus on our problems here at home. We need to get our house in order. And not only are all of our problems here, but our solutions are here too. There's no reason to be sending so much money throughout the course of the world. If we brought economic stability here at home, saved our shining city on a hill, started manufacturing and exporting again, then the dollar would stabilize and the rest of the world wouldn't be so desperate to get off of the American dollar. And in fact, it would benefit the rest of the world to stay on the dollar simply because there's so much of it in circulation that it would be a complete nightmare to get off of it. And so if we just stop manipulating our currency, work to balance our budget, and got to a surplus, the rest of the world would benefit from it, and so would we.
The other thing, though, too, that I think we've got to do from a national security perspective is, you mentioned about China buying up a lot of our, and it's not just China, but it's also, you're right, it is privatization
Canada
of a lot of our natural resources through these so-called American companies that are actually multinational companies. In fact, in where I live in West Virginia, we have a massive oil and gas trade here, along with coal. Although coal is now, we have tons of coal. We got enough coal to run this country forever, but they're just not digging it out of the ground anymore. Not at the levels, or they're digging it out, but they're sending it to China. But the thing is that with our oil and gas, a lot of the companies that are drilling our oil and gas are not even American companies.
That's correct. That's
It's
correct.
Insane. So why? And then you've got these guys buying up land. This baffles me. I've lived in other countries. I lived in Japan. I've lived in Korea. Americans can't go anywhere in the world and buy land in another country. But yet we allow everybody to come into this country and own land. And land is one of those things that we can't make more of.
Correct.
I suppose we could do like China and try to build some islands off of the off of the coast. But
every war throughout history has been fought over real estate.
That's right.
And real estate is territory, but it's also resources. And what we're doing is we're allowing the plundering of our country in order to enrich the oligarchs through their corporate ties and through their shell companies. Because you and I both know that a lot of the uranium that has been extracted here, a lot of the lithium, a lot of our natural gas, and a lot of our feed that has been grown and is feeding cattle in other countries, all of this stuff is owned by companies that are not even American companies.
That's right.
And so when people talk about, because they say, oh, well, you want to nationalize oil and coal and uranium and lithium, would you introduce a bill to do that? Yes. Yes, I would. Absolutely, I would. Because countries that have control over their own resources can afford to pay for their robust social systems. There's no reason why the richest country in the world, which that's us, we control 30.8 98% of wealth and resources throughout the world with only 5% of the population. And in California, we control 17.1% of that wealth. And so, we have the richest country in the world. I live in the richest state in the world, and yet you've got homeless encampments that are covering, entire cities. You got homeless people under every bridge. You have schools that are failing and are feeding into the incarceration system. You have crime that is rampant. You have food costs that are soaring and energy costs that are soaring. But what I try to remind people is that this is not an accident. This is by design. They want our food to be expensive and our energy to be expensive. They found 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And then what did they do? They outlawed the gas stove.
Yep.
Kern County has some of the deepest oil reserves in the world. And yet California has the worst roads and the highest gas taxes and the highest gas cost of any state in our country. And so, we have deep uranium deposits in Death Valley and in Kern County. We have lithium in the Salton Sea. We have natural gas in the northwestern United States. Yep. We are so rich here.
Oh, they're finding rare earth minerals now in the used fracking water that's coming up. That this is another really great use. One of the issues that has people have had with fracking is that what do you do with all of this contaminated water that comes out of the ground? Well, it was never cost effective to recycle that water. They tried building some plants here in West Virginia and they just didn't use them because it was just not cost effective. But now when they can extract rare earth minerals, and what they're finding is there's a lot of it in this water, it's now cost effective. So technology and innovation, can make things work.
Correct.
We've been able to take coal, for example, and turn it into hydrogen and burn it cleanly with no emissions.
Isn't it incredible what we're able to do when we just start thinking and using our brains?
But every time we go to war, though, all of that stops because money gets diverted, energy gets diverted, resources get diverted to the war effort and then to the buildup effort afterwards.
Well, and I believe that it's on us to alchemize that. Right. And so the thing is I look at war and the way that it can stop innovation. But then in the past, there was this program called Megatons to Megawatts. Have you heard about this program?
No.
So there was an MIT physicist who came up with this idea to repurpose the 20,000 nuclear warheads that Russia had and to ship them to the United States to be used for nuclear power in the United States. And from 1992 to the year 2012, Russian nuclear warheads powered 10% of the entire American energy grid for $17 billion. And so Russia decided not to continue forward with that program in 2012. But the way that I look at that is I look at these weapons that were used for war that were then able to power our grid. Look at the military industrial complex. If that were to be revitalized and used to create CT scan machines and MRI machines and create more hospitals, because if we can always afford to kill people, I think that we should we can afford to heal people. And then, furthermore, if we understand that fracking is going to create an opportunity to extract rare earth minerals, but it could also taint the water supply, why are we not investing more in desalination? Because every submarine and every aircraft carrier runs on uranium. It runs on nuclear energy, and it also runs on desalinized water. So you have a city of 6,000 people that can go underwater for months at a time, and they recycle their air. They make fresh water out of the sea that surrounds them, and they run on uranium. And so we're not going to stop building more cities in the desert. Water is not going to become something that we're going to just have to be more careful with. What we need to do is we need to create more water. And it just so happens that about 75% of planet Earth is covered in water, and we have the technology to funnel fresh water inland, but we're ranked 33rd in the world for our ability to desalinize water.
Right.
What we should do is we should look at Israel and we should look at Saudi Arabia, because those two countries have two of the largest desalination facility plants in the world, and they're doing incredible things with desalination. But what that would do is it would create an abundant resource. It would make it so that we could grow the food that we eat here, and we continue to grow those, build those cities out in the desert. And it would also, in the event that those water levels are rising, why don't we funnel all of that water inland? Let's continue to funnel so much water inland that we can create a utopia out of these places in the desert that just lack for water. I mean, I really feel like we have the opportunity to build this kingdom of heaven here at hand, but we're so interested in the destruction of our neighbors.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get back onto the subject of these world oligarchs, the World Economic Forum, those types.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, as America, first of all, how do we push back against them, and how can we change things? Because it seems like they're so embedded, with many of our politicians. I hate to say it. I know from just running in my own campaign, there's so much dark money that goes into a lot of these races, and you have once somebody gets in, then of course they got to continue to raise money, and if a whole bunch of the wealth is controlled by a few people, it seems like they're going to have a hell of a lot of power to be able to manipulate and control policy.
I'm trying to sneak my way in. And because I feel like if they knew about me right now, they would be pumping so much money into the race against me. And so the thing is, if I get in there and I can really start affecting change, first off, I bring the people with me. The people understand that this is not a system that can be fought by one person, but it needs to be fought and understood by so many different people. And so I'm hoping that I can compel the people to understand what I'm doing through social media, through interviews like this. So then that way they will support me if I get in there, so I could keep my seat. Because you know what I refuse to do? I refuse to fundraise. People told me, oh, you know what? You're going to spend 90% of your time on the phones fundraising. No, thank you. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to beg people for money to try to change this country. Instead, I would rather create the things that money buys. Create human infrastructure, because I believe that human beings are our most valuable and underutilized resource on the planet. And where they can't beat me? They can't beat me in the trenches. They could spend all of this money in the world trying to control us in the airwaves, trying to control the internet game. But if they want to beat me, they have to spend money on the ground game, or they have to get out there and work. They have to actually put up the signs in the district. They have to show up at the local colleges and the local businesses and down on Main Street and at people's homes. And I can tell you that I've been doing that for the last 20 months. The district that I am running in overlaps with Leticia Castillo, and our district has the largest change in registered voters in the entire country. We have 9,000 new Republican voters in the 39th district in California.
Wow, that's awesome.
In addition, we're outperforming the polls like crazy. So it's a plus 24 Democrat district when we started, right? So I should have lost by about 24%. Statewide, Republicans in California outperformed turnout by 5.4%. But in my district, we outperformed turnout by 13.9%.
Wow.
And so, people are excited. They understand that I'm not your typical Republican. I'm a pretty unconventional guy. And I have a lot of not just Republicans that are excited about me, but Democrats too. I went to this meeting the other night called the Residents for Responsible Representation in Riverside. And when I got done speaking, the gal in the front row, she stood up. She wanted to shake my hand. She said, "I just want to let you know that congratulations, you sound like a Democrat." And she shook my hand. And then immediately after her, the guy in the back row who had a Trump hat on, who came all the way up to Paso Robles to see me speak at the statewide Trump rally for our Trump train. He said, "Hey, I just want to let everybody know that David is the hardest working candidate I've ever met. I love this guy. He really cares about Riverside County." And I was just like, okay, man, if we can have a Democrat in the front row who's excited about me and says that I sound like a Democrat, and a guy with a Trump hat in the back row who's excited about me and talks about how hardworking I am, man, if I could just win over these rooms, one room at a time, we win.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And I can tell, there's most of these politicians, I think, guys that go into it to be career politicians, that's how they started off in life. They've never had any life experience other than that. It's a very different world for them. They have a very different view of what their purpose is. And it's not about the people. It's not about supporting them. Guys like you and myself and others who have lived some life, who have been, in other countries and seen what it's like and have appreciation for this country.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very different world. But you have a very problem-solving mind, I guess I could say.
Thank you.
It reminds me of I'm in engineering, by trade, and I'm a systems engineer, and in cybersecurity in particular. So a lot of what I do is troubleshooting and kind of figuring out solutions. And that's what I think we're missing in Congress. We need that sort of thing. So I'm glad to see that with you. In fact, it gives me some hope that, maybe all is not lost in California after all.
I really, I'm going to speak to that.
Okay.
We, all is not lost in California. I feel like we kind of get a little bit of a bad rap, but the truth is if you were to look at the map of the counties and how they vote, mm-hmm. most of California is red because most of California is rural. And so you have a lot of farmers and you have a lot of people that live up in the Sierra Nevadas or up in Northern California that are very passionate about this state. And, there's a movement to make the new California, which I don't know if it's going to work or not, but there are people enough that are passionate about it to write a couple of books about how to save California. And the big thing for me is I am very solutions oriented. And so I packed book 1 of Common Sense for California, A Guide to the New Revolution, because not everyone's going to read 960 pages. So what I did was I wrote in book 1 a summary of ideas, which is an opening burst, which is a machine gun term. Your opening burst has to be a long one. And so I filled, about 10 pages or so with 50 different ideas for how we can get involved and start fixing this country and start fixing the state of California. But I wanted to go deeper, which is why I wrote the 960 plus pages, because I want people who are capable of understanding the way that the system is designed to understand that we didn't get here by accident.
Well, let's. I got to cut to a commercial break to give a word to our sponsors. But when we get back from the break, I want to get into that a little bit and talk about your book and some of your ideas on how to fix some of the problems specifically with California. So, folks, stick with us. We'll be right back after a short moment.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Welcome back to the Raising Cain Show. I'm Nate Cain, your host, and we're here with David Serpa, who is running for Congress in California. And we've been talking about some pretty amazing ideas, and we've been talking about a lot of the problems that are going on in the world. But I want to focus in now in this next segment on California particularly. There's all kinds of things that are going on there. California is an amazing state. I grew up there. There's so much there in terms of natural resources and just opportunities, but it just seems like there's so much waste and unfortunately, so much bureaucracy. I've heard people say that, that the state legislature or that the state is ungovernable. And it certainly seems that, that for all of the rural areas and all of the conservative people who live in California, and there are a lot of conservatives. I mean, I grew up there and I'm conservative. My whole family is. I have to wonder about things like, that have, some of these bills that just recently passed in California, like the ones where they can, take your kids away if you don't agree to their, to their gender identity and things like that. What do you see as the big problem, in California, and what do you think that you might be able to do to fix that? What are some of your solutions, your ideas? I realize not all of these would be things that maybe you would do in your office, but obviously you've written a book about California, and what do you think can be done to fix some of these issues?
So, we both know that President Reagan had, problems. There's not a single perfect president that has existed in the history of this country. But what he did understand was that the Republicans had to articulate a party message and then find common ground to be able to convert people into the Republican Party. And so, through his tough on crime messaging, through being able to intellectualize some of the ideas that he had, and in addition to being able to de-escalate a war with the Soviet Union that could have been a nuclear blowout that didn't need to become one, and of course ultimately ended up ending in the collapse of the Soviet Union and in 20 years of nuclear energy for America. And so he said that a person that is an 80%, who agrees with you 80% of the time, is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. And so I think that the first thing that we need to do in California is we need to understand that the Republican Party currently is filled with a bunch of losers. And these losers are comfortable being the participation trophy party in California. They don't even try to win elections anymore. And so the local central committees, which are our local governing bodies in each county, have to be fixed. They have to be made right. They have to run like a business, and they need to recruit, train, and organize behind candidates. But unfortunately, our local central committees are a mess. The state CAGOP is not necessarily as organized as it needs to be, but it's getting better. And then we don't have a party platform. So every time that somebody runs for governor, they end up running against Governor Newsom, and they get up to debate him, and they can't get up and say, California is an agriculture state. We should be leading the nation in agriculture. We should be exporting the food that the nation eats here. California should be able to get a health care for all passed here. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We should be able to have the best schools in the world. We just passed this lottery system. And so the thing is, we as Californians continue to vote for things to make our lives better, but then they never happen. Prop 1A, we voted for $1.2 billion in arts and music funding. And then we had $1 billion in arts and music funding cut the next year by Governor Newsom. We voted to establish the lottery, which was supposed to save our schools here in California.
Yeah.
And then what happened to all of that lottery money? And then, and I do know, I could tell you, and the other thing is, we voted for the bullet train, about $9 billion that was supposed to build 28 different stations and about 900 feet or 900 miles of rail line. And how many rail stations have been built? And, you could go down, we voted for $7.9 billion in water infrastructure that was supposed to help retain water and here in California, build dams, build more canals. How much new water infrastructure was built?
Sounds like there needs to be an audit very similar to what needs to happen in the Pentagon.
That's right. So the thing is
all this money.
A lot of what President Trump ends up talking about through like Elon Musk with his Department of Government Efficiency. I've been on this. Audit California. That's what I want to do. From the beginning, I talked about auditing California. And so what is an audit without teeth? So the thing is, if you fell in paying your taxes, if you were to launder billions or trillions of dollars in money, you would go to jail. And then we had $24 billion in funding for the homeless just go missing here in California. Just go missing. There's no accountability for any of the money that's been spent. And so it is not compassion to just throw money at a problem if you're not going to follow through and make sure that these problems are actually addressed. And then finally, I'll wrap with this, just on this topic. I read Governor Newsom's book, Citizenville. When I disagree with someone adamantly, I read their books.
Yeah.
I want to understand their brain. And he had a lot of really good ideas for San Francisco, and he had a lot of really good ideas for California. But ultimately, he was beaten down by the bureaucracy, and he kowtowed. So things like legacy companies, he wanted to do free internet for all of San Francisco and do free Wi-Fi and have the city pay for it. And ultimately, he wasn't able to do it because of the legacy companies that control the internet in the city of San Francisco. And so you have, like, he also wasn't able to fix. We should have an app for government. We should have an app for the DMV. We should have an app so that you can register to vote. We should have an app for our justice system so that you could get all of our paperwork and everything. We should have an app for our healthcare system so that everything is centralized and that we can run everything.
I want to interject something there. We have an app for registering to vote here in West Virginia, and it's very effective. Like, anybody can get on and register to vote very easily.
That's awesome.
The downside to it, though, and this is where my cybersecurity background and election integrity work comes into play, is just like in a bank. When you open up a bank account, we have what they call know your customer laws. You cannot open a bank account in this country without proving who you are. And when it comes to, but yet you can go and you can register to vote even in my state of West Virginia on an app, and you don't have to prove anything about being an American citizen or being, even a resident. You just have to put down an address, but they don't validate or verify anything. It's crazy. So if you do create an app for that, demand that they at least have verification, know your customer, type rules for it.
We don't have any verification right now, and we don't have an app. So the thing is about our election systems is, about everything in this country. And I love federalism because it allows the different states to be different experiments, right? So like in Utah, most of what you can get done in the DMV, you can do through the drive-through. And so in states where there isn't a lot of room for bureaucracy, an administrative state to overinflate itself, to pick the bones clean of the taxpayers, they run more efficiently. And so we have to understand that by running things efficiently, it will create a reduction in redundancies, and we will end up needing to fire a lot of people that work for the government. And not only people that work for the government, but there's a lot of people that work for the private sector that will be displaced by things like artificial intelligence and self-driving vehicles. And, Amazon bought 750,000 robots. And so they're not doing this to help create more jobs.
Right.
They're doing this to put American workers out of work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and so I believe that we need to give the American people ownership of the economy through stuff like the American Dividend, because I do believe that there will be a lot of people that will be pushed permanently out of work. We've been paying into this system for 260, 270 years with a business. A business pays dividends. Businesses don't come back and ask their employees for more money every year. And that's what we've gotten comfortable doing in America.
I want to bring something up on the screen here. I want to talk about your opponent for a moment here.
Please.
And so let me bring this up real quick here. Share screen. So I have this clip here, and I want to get your comment on it because I think it's kind of interesting in light of what is happening around the country right now. I think most Americans are on the same page. Even I think most Americans in California are on the same page when it comes to this. It's a very, very tiny, tiny fraction of a minority that seems to be, have all the power when it comes to this issue. But check this out.
Okay. There are some women who say, and I've talked to a few who say this. They say, "Hey, I'd like some privacy in the bathroom. I'd prefer not to encounter, naked penises, frankly." They say even that the penis is a telltale sign that someone is a male. I mean, there are people who kind of really bought into the rumor that only men have penises. How do we account for that? How do you respond to that?
Well, what I would say is that most transgender people that I know, and it's a very, I think, distinct minority of people. It is a very, I think, we're talking not about a lot of people. I think a person who wants to use a woman's bathroom, who identifies as transgender, really does think of themselves as a female. So how we go about trying to, respect their basic right to live, I think will be an important part of this law. And
With the
bathrooms,
law,
well, wait a minute, bathrooms are, where you want to take this conversation instead of the basic right to just life is something that I'm kind of mystified that you're kind of not focusing on first, that we're going straight to the controversy over bathrooms. So, you know what? I think this interview is over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're gonna
I think this interview is over.
I just had one last question.
No, the interview's over.
We
Please
want to
turn off
know
the cameras.
what is a woman?
Please turn off the cameras.
Excuse me. So we're gonna end the interview. If you guys could please pack up and return the office exactly.
I just wanted to know.
found it.
Okay,
I came all this way to know what.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then he says, I came all this way to know what a woman is. And she says, you're not going to find out today. And so the thing is I went to Congressman Takano's town hall because he won't debate me. He refused to accept the debate through UCR, refuses to accept the debate through RCC, refused to accept the debate through Calvary Chapel. I want this man to show up in the same room as me and in front of his constituents and just answer for things like this, because this is very simple stuff. It's low-hanging fruit. I don't even really like talking about this, to be honest with you. But the thing is it's so ridiculous that he's pushed this far that there was a gentleman that stood up at his town hall. He raised his hand and he said, I have 2 daughters that are high school athletes, and they've both gotten college scholarships to go and do track and field next year. And they're worried that, and this is what he said, a woman who is not born a woman is going to come into track and field and compete with them. And I would say about 25% of the room turned around and they just gave him a nasty look. Like he was a bad person for wanting his daughters to be able to compete against other biological women. When in a sport like track and field, which there is a drastic difference. It's not like we're talking about, checkers or something like that.
Or golf or
even golf. I mean, it's absolutely wild to put. It's what Title IX is all about. It's about giving women an opportunity to compete, protecting women's spaces. And so for him to not be willing to look at this man in the eyes and say, you know what, your daughters should have a safe space where they're able to compete. He went ahead and he said, well, have they ever competed against a trans athlete? And the man said, no, well, not yet. He said, well, then it's not really a problem. It is a problem, though. Riley Gaines competed against a trans athlete and was defeated. We see all of these, a volleyball player that was given a concussion. We see women in boxing, and that's another clip that he has. And so if we just could be reasonable about common sense, I have no hatred in my heart for anyone in the trans community.
Yep.
You just, when your rights are infringing on someone else's rights, that's where there's a problem. And so as an adult, you should be able to do whatever it is that you want to do with other consenting adults, but you should not be able to go into protected spaces for women like bathrooms or locker rooms, or to compete in sports against other, women, because those rights were fought for by women. It's not even about trans rights anymore. This is the new man's rights movement. You don't have a right to go into women's spaces and force yourself on them. That's not the way that this works. And then what he said during that was so stupid. He said, this is a basic right to live, a basic right to life. Going to the bathroom in a restroom that fits your gender that you had from the moment that you were born is not denying you a right to life. And then I watched the debate between, I think it was Blair White, who is a trans woman. She's a biological man who very much looks like a woman. She's certainly doing her best. And she was debating against Destiny, who's a very blue-haired, kind of typical, liberal or whatnot. But he at least participated in the debate. And you know what he said? He said, there's some men who have, a very feminine penis. I'm like, feminine penis. Those are 2 words that I never thought in a million
never go together.
years that I would hear together.
Right.
Did you have go for it.
Oh yeah, I do have that other clip too. I want to bring that one up here. Hold on a second.
Yeah, that one's just as wild.
This is the Mike Tyson clip. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Let me bring that up real quick here because that is crazy. And it does feel a little bit like we're living in upside down world backwards with things that never would have even been considered just a couple of years ago, and it just blows my mind. All right, let's see if I can get this to come up here. All right.
Should Mike Tyson, have you heard of him?
Yes, I have.
If he identifies as a female, should he be allowed to box?
Well, look, again,
No, that's a very simple question because you said yes, that if he identifies, should he be allowed to enter a boxing match with a biological female?
well,
Got him.
Yeah, and he said in that clip, he says, if Mike Tyson identifies as trans, he should be able to box with other women. And I think that this is just an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. And what it does is it's a complete dereliction of duty, because in leadership, you're supposed to suffer the slings and arrows of making a decision, not pass the buck onto children or their parents, because then children are put into the crosshairs of this battle. And this isn't something that they need to be involved in at their local recreation center or a local collegiate match or, a high school match or something like that, where they're put in a situation where they feel like they have to stand up for their rights because their congressman refuses to do it.
Well, look, folks, this is the kind of thing. The reason I show these clips is to show a very different type of candidate than what you are. And
Thank you.
For those that are watching, I hope you guys see this and you recognize the importance of getting out there to vote. I want to bring up something else here real quickly, and because we are, we're getting a little bit close on time here.
Okay.
But there was in my race here in West Virginia, we had a pretty low turnout. I think it was like 18%. Most of the people that showed up, were over, I think 80% were over age 55. So we have a very different, demographic, a very different dynamic with our races. We have other problems here in West Virginia. But in your race, what do you see really as the way to bring people together, number one, and get them motivated to come out and vote? Because ultimately that's what it takes. It takes getting enough votes. And unfortunately, there are people who will just go and vote party line. There are also people who will show up to vote not knowing anything about the people that they're voting for. So what do you see as really the solution to that? And I think, I think you've shown yourself to be, a quality candidate, way more qualified in terms of just your knowledge about what's going on in the world. I mean, that's critically important because of the kinds of decisions that, you would be making. But you're very up on what's going on domestically. And, you seem to be able to address these issues in an area that, let's face it, me running here, I can be as far right as I want, in fact, in some sense, the more far right I am, the better it helps me in the race. You're in a state where you do need to be able to, win over the hearts and minds of people on both sides of the issue. So I guess what I'm asking is what do you see as probably the most important thing that a candidate running in your position, the qualities that he needs to have that clearly you have and that your opponent doesn't? This is your opportunity. Tell us what makes you different than him.
I'm willing to stand for something. That's that whole, if you're not willing to stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that, with Takano, he doesn't stand for anything. He stands for absolutely nothing. And so I could be to his right, I could be to his left, I could be all over the political spectrum, and I am all over the political spectrum. Anybody who talks to me understands that my ideas are a little bit all over the place because I'm an independent thinker. I'm a student of history, and I am a lover of policy. And so for me, I could not be more excited about writing policy and making changes for the American people, because too many people get interested in this because they're egomaniacs and they want to be seen, and they want to be seen as making a change, but they don't actually stand for anything, which is exhausting. And it's obvious when you see them and they get up and they speak because they have nothing to say. I'm like, you spend so much time and energy and money to get in front of people and you have nothing to say. And so for me, when I talk to Democrats and they understand that, I want to fix a universal healthcare system through the United States Medical Corps. They understand that I want to create a UBI-based system called the American Dividend. They understand that I want to end the forever wars. They understand that I'm pro-union because I believe that unions, like America, are a great hope, but they have to be checked from the inside. They understand, that I'm a pro-education. Not only am I pro-education, I developed curriculum to teach real estate to high school students and adults, and I had it translated live into Spanish. So I've spent my life standing on business. You know what I mean? And I've spent my life really fighting for people that no one's willing to fight for. And Takano is in a position where he can make so much change. And I've heard good things about who he was 12 years ago or 10 years ago, but I don't hear anyone talking about, oh, look at what he accomplished in the last 8 years or 6 years ago, or look at what he did when he helped me out 5 years ago. No one, because he is a ghost when it comes to his home district. It is impossible to find him. You would be better off looking for Bigfoot or for spotting a pig flying or finding Santa Claus in the North Pole, because you're not going to find Takano in front of his constituents in his own district.
Yeah. Well, I always like to, we're out of time here, and I always like to make sure and give my guests the final word. There's so many topics that I would love to get in with you, and I'm going to have you back on because
that'd be great.
You got some great ideas. I'm really curious. Like, there's things that I never thought about, this idea of a dividend. And you're right. There is a lot of talk about universal basic income, which I am totally opposed to, but
I am too.
This idea of a dividend for the natural resources that are in our country. I mean, you think about I have always been somebody that has been, when I look at capitalism, and you read the writings of John Locke, the one concern that he had was the issue of real estate. You have this problem of you can't make more of it. Same That's thing right. with natural resources, and so there is that question of whether or not somebody should just be able to come in and buy it all up. And he was not opposed to people having as much capital as they wanted to have, cash, but he was opposed to people being able to buy up all the natural resources, all of the land, all of the lumber, because he saw that as the giving somebody an unfair advantage and
That's right.
really oppressing others through monopolization. And
these are as old as time. Like you look at the Articles of Confederation. And the reason why those as an original constitution did not stand. And then you look at the rebellion, the Daniel Shea Rebellion or the Shea Rebellion, and where farmers stood up who had fought in the Revolutionary War. They went and they took an armory. 1,200 of them went to fight against the government. The Whiskey Rebellion, and they were shot. Well, this is Daniel Shea's rebellion, and then the Whiskey Rebellion came shortly after. But Daniel Shea's rebellion was shot down by a private military hired by private capital. And so you're absolutely right. There are people that knew this from the beginning, like Thomas Paine knew this, and he wrote Agrarian Justice. He wrote The Rights of Man in addition to Common Sense. Yeah. And so, and then you had people like Madison who wanted to develop a central bank and wanted for the elites to have buy-in so that he could build a debt-based system, not only for this country, for the people that lived in it. So this sort of struggle is old as time. Yeah. And I am 100% completely and totally opposed to universal basic income because it is based on an arbitrary number. You know,
Right.
they say, oh, well, how much should it be? $1,000, $2,000. Okay, well, it's arbitrary. So you're money printing. So what I would do is I would say, we got to cut the deficit. We need to get to a surplus. Then you issue a dividend. In Alaska, they have an Alaska oil dividend where all of the Alaskans get an oil
Saudi
dividend.
Arabia does that too, by the way.
Saudi Arabia does it. That's why all of their people are so rich.
Yep.
Here, the natives, the native tribes have a dividend for all of their casinos.
It for the casinos. Yeah.
So when their tribe does well, everyone in their tribe does well. So when America does well, I want Americans to do well. And I also want to create
that's a great idea.
A incentivized voter who understands that if they vote for a politician who is a warmonger, who cuts into our budget by continuing to send money overseas to spend money on war, they need to get rid of that fool because it cuts into our deficit. So in the 1960s, there was a peace dividend that was being pushed as an incentive to stop the wars, start spending money on people. And in fact, UBI was almost passed under Nixon. It passed in the Senate. And the only reason why it didn't pass in the House is because they thought that their plan would get more of a universal basic income for people. So I don't like the structure of a universal basic income. It ties to nothing. I instead would prefer the American Dividend, which is a monthly based income that would be paid out based on the previous quarter's gross domestic product.
I think that's a great idea. I like that.
Thank you.
I definitely would like to have you on again, and
I'd love to
get
come on
into
again.
some of these other topics because we barely scratched the surface. And
I agree.
Very rarely do I find somebody who's running for office that has the depth of knowledge that you do, and so many different topics, including history and foreign policy, and it's great. It's refreshing, to be honest with you. So you definitely have my endorsement. I will be praying for you, and I always end my show with prayer. But before I do, I always want to ask you if there's one thing, because people do have short attention spans, and so if there's one thing you want them to take away from this message and our conversation today, what would be the most important thing?
Absolutely. And I loved being on the show. I enjoy having these sort of highbrow intellectual conversations with people because, that's what people are looking for. They want to dig in. They want to be able to listen to people in long form and be able to get a really honest idea of who people are and what's in their brain housing group. And so what would be the most important thing to walk away from with this? And I've said this before, this flag right here, my sister flew it in Iraq. She's a combat veteran. I flew this flag in Afghanistan, this exact flag in Afghanistan, and I'm a combat veteran. Our problems are not overseas. There was no one in Afghanistan that was an enemy of my Constitution. But there are people that are enemies of my Constitution up in Sacramento and over in Washington, D.C. And the swamp doesn't start in D.C., and it doesn't start in Sacramento. It starts in your local Republican Party. And I know that you know that, because of what happened with your election. And so we have to stand up. We have to take the fight. And the best way to do that is we as Christians are not called to go and kill for it. Jesus, when Judas had betrayed him, he didn't go and set up a complex ambush and decide that they were going to fight to the last man. He taught us how to be betrayed. He taught us that you have to be willing to die for a better world, not be willing to kill for a better world. So it's love that's going to get us there. Ultimately, it is love. And we've been given a great blueprint for how to show love to people. And that is in the most radical man that has ever walked planet Earth, which of course is Jesus Christ, and which is a great way for us to transition into our prayer. So, our problems are here, our solutions are here, and it's time to preserve our shining city on a hill.
Amen. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer, and then we'll end the show. And but I want to just thank you again for coming on. And folks, listen, before I go to prayer, where can people follow you? Where can they find out more about your campaign? Where can they donate? Because it does cost money to run these campaigns.
Absolutely. So davidserpaforcongress.com, and you can donate there on my website. You can also contact me there. My cell phone number is on my website. So I give it out to everybody, and I do pick up my cell phone. And I also post my weekly schedule. Every Monday, we put out the weekly schedule, let everybody know where we're going to be for the week. So I'm easy to get a hold of. I got tons of content on my website. And of course, because I am not one of those people who doesn't stand for anything, I also have all of my issues on my website as well.
And social media, are you on X? Or are you on?
I'm on all of it. I'm
Okay.
on X. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or not
What's your
X. Serpa for Congress, the number 4.
Okay. Folks, listen, when I was running, the biggest issue I had was reaching the people because of how remote everything was. That's not so much, it's a little bit of an issue for you, but it's definitely not as bad as it was for me. But here's the thing. Every district that I knocked on doors, I won. Every single one of those districts. But I just didn't have enough people helping me in all of these different places at the same time. If you guys live anywhere near David Serpa, consider going out and helping him knock on doors. Consider volunteering for his campaign, even if he's not somebody that's in your district, because here's the thing, it's every single vote that counts, in Congress. And it's not just one person. And if you're somebody who, is only, donates money to your own, candidates, consider donating outside of your race. Maybe you live in a place where you don't have a good option, but clearly here today, you heard of somebody who's got some good ideas, somebody who does stand for something, and that's your opportunity to make a difference. You can support David, to get elected, and that way you have a voice through him. So folks, the reason I always pray and end my show in prayer is this: we have to do our part. We have to stand up. We've got to fight. We've got to, bring our ideas to the table and be willing to put, ourselves on the line. That's what David is doing here. But at the end of the day, our founders understood that it was about more than that, that we needed the providence of God. We needed that hand of God to help us through those things. We do what we can. And for the things that we have no control over, that's where we hand it over to God. We say, God, we need your help. So I'm going to do that. Heavenly Father, I thank you right now, Lord, for David. I thank you for what you've called him to do, Lord, in his running for office. I thank you, Lord, for the ideas that he brings to the table, his desire for unity, which I know, Lord, was one of the things that you desired for us. And I pray, God, that you would bless his campaign, that you would bring in everything that's needed for him to have a successful campaign. I pray, Lord, for him to win. I pray for his win for the sake of everybody that I know that lives in his district. I may not live there, but I still have family in the area, Lord. And I pray that you would bless California, that you would bring California back from the brink. It has so much potential. And I pray that you would restore hope, Lord, for the people, not just the people of California, but for all over this country who have lost hope, who have maybe become cynical. I pray that you would give people hope, that they would come to vote, and that they would get out there and bring a friend and do their civic duty. I pray and I ask your blessing and keeping him safe while he's out there campaigning. Be with him and his family. I know how much it taxes the family to be out in campaigning, and I just pray that you would give him everything he needs to sustain him. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, folks, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I thank you guys for coming on and watching this on this Sunday. We're doing this now, this new show every Sunday, to where we're going to be bringing on different candidates. And, during the election season and after the election season's over, hopefully we'll be bringing on our representatives and our, various officials to talk about what they're doing and what they're working on, so we can actually hold them accountable, and we can ask, questions and be more informed about what's going on. So this will be a regular part of the Raising Cane show, is our Sunday candidate day. Folks, you remember, you can also catch all of my shows. If you missed one, you can catch it at theraisingcaneshow.com. We do this as part of a Patriot Prayer Network on Rumble, but we also, and I'm also multicasting it to X and to Facebook, but I'm also on another show, Unleash the Political News Hour with America Out Loud, and you can catch those shows as well, along with any other interviews that I do on other people's shows. So please go and check out theraisingcaneshow.com. Remember, if you can support the show, you can go and buy coffee at Smoking Gun Coffee, and remember to use the code CANE to make sure that we get the credit for that. But God bless you all. Stay strong, stay vigilant. and stay free.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some cane.